There's a certain kind of tension that shows up when nothing is technically wrong, but something just doesn't feel quite right anymore. You know what I mean? The house still does what it's supposed to do. It shelters you, it functions. It made sense when you bought it. And frankly, on paper, it probably still makes sense now. And yet, there's this quiet feeling that it's not really lining up with how you're living anymore, even though you can't point to one single broken thing. That's what makes this so tricky. You're not reacting to a crisis. Nothing dramatic happened. There's no urgent deadline pushing you. It's more subtle than that. It's the sense that life has shifted a bit, but the house hasn't moved with it. And now there's this growing gap between the two. And you're left thinking, what am I supposed to do with that? A lot of homeowners sit with that exact thought. If nothing's actually broken, why does it feel off? And there's nothing wrong with noticing that. And there's nothing wrong with the house for still working either. Most people don't wake up one morning and suddenly decide their home doesn't fit. It usually doesn't happen like that. What happens is life changes, quietly, gradually. Daily routines shift, family dynamics evolve. Maybe privacy matters more than it used to. Maybe space feels different now. Or your work, hobbies, or social life have drifted in ways that don't quite match your current location anymore. None of those changes on their own feels dramatic enough to demand action. They're subtle, they build slowly. Meanwhile, the house just keeps doing what it's always done. It doesn't grow or adapt the way people do. It doesn't rearrange itself around new priorities. So over time, there's this growing mismatch. Life has evolved, but the container for that life hasn't kept up. And because it happened gradually, it's easy to minimize it or even brush it off. I see this more often than people expect. You're not unhappy with the house, but you're also not fully at ease in it anymore. And those two things, they can absolutely exist at the same time. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. When a house still functions, questioning it can feel indulgent. There's that quiet voice that says, you should be grateful, or wanting something different sounds unnecessary. Maybe even, isn't this irresponsible if nothing's wrong? That voice can be pretty persuasive, especially when the house still checks all the obvious boxes. Part of the reason is how we talk about housing decisions in general. Moving is usually framed around necessity. Something breaks, space runs out, finances force a change. When the motivation is more about fit than failure, it can feel harder to justify, even to yourself. But here's the thing. Practicality isn't only about whether something still works. It's also about whether it supports how you actually live right now. A home can be perfectly functional and still quietly misaligned with your day-to-day reality. Noticing that doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It doesn't mean you're restless. It just means you're paying attention. One of the hardest parts of this stage is figuring out what the discomfort actually means. Sometimes discomfort is temporary. It comes from routines getting stale or from being in a short-term transition. That kind usually passes. Other times, the discomfort sticks around. No matter how much you rearrange things or try to adjust your mindset, there's still friction. That's when people start wondering if the issue might actually be the house itself. The challenge is that both types feel similar at first. They show up as irritation, distraction, or low-level tension. You think about alternatives, but you're not necessarily ready to act. And unless you slow down and really name what's happening, it's easy to either overreact or ignore it completely. Getting clear on that difference matters. It's often the line between making a thoughtful decision and staying stuck longer than you need to. This is where a lot of people hover. They don't want to move too soon and regret it, but they also don't want to pretend the tension isn't there. So they sit in the middle, waiting for the feeling to either disappear or become undeniable. When this tension goes unnamed, it rarely just fades away. It tends to leak into other parts of life. You might notice you're less patient at home, a little more restless than usual. Small inconveniences that never used to bother you suddenly feel bigger than they should. The house becomes the backdrop for that frustration, even if you never say out loud that the fit has changed. Over time, it's surprisingly easy to normalize that feeling. You tell yourself, this is just how things are now. Maybe everyone feels this way. And the cost of that approach isn't immediate, but it adds up. The longer the question sits there unresolved, the heavier it starts to feel. Ignoring the tension doesn't actually preserve the status quo. It just postpones understanding it. And when you finally do confront it, the decision can feel bigger and more overwhelming than it ever needed to be. It's okay if you don't have a clear answer yet. This isn't something that needs a quick fix. It's not a problem you have to solve just to prove you're decisive. Sometimes the most stabilizing move is simply acknowledging that the question exists and letting it stay open without pressure. Clarity here usually comes from understanding what the tension is really about, not from forcing a yes or no decision. And that understanding tends to come from honest reflection, not urgency. The goal isn't to decide today whether you're moving or staying. It's to get clear about what has actually changed and why it matters to you. If it helps to have something concrete to work through, some people use a simple tool like the 5-step Move Decision Worksheet to map out what still fits, what doesn't, and what they're actually responding to. Not as a way to rush to a decision, but as a way to see the situation more clearly. The question itself is reasonable. Giving it space is often the first step toward easing the pressure that comes with it.